Hi and welcome to the Rob Moore's Leadership Untitled podcast, the show where I invite an expert in the world of L&D and or leadership to come along and share their views and thoughts and experiences with us, and then by the end of the show, based on that conversation, we choose a title. This week, I'm joined by David James, a significant thought leader in the world of L&D. He used to be the Director of Learning at Walt Disney and is now the Chief Learning Officer at Looop, as well as, of course, being the podcast host for the Learning and Development podcast. Please join me in welcoming David James, and let's go for it. So hi, David, and thanks for coming along to the Rob Moore's Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Rob. I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on as a guest.
No, thank you very much for agreeing to come along. It's, as you well know, without bigging you up too much, I hope, as I've probably done in the introduction to this, it's someone I've followed for quite a long time, and especially on LinkedIn, you're a big voice on there for what I believe L&D needs to really push into. It has done for a while, but certainly over the next 5 years or so. And I think the audience would love to know from your point of view, how is it you got involved in L&D in the first place?
So I've been in learning and development since the late 1990s. I was working at Lloyds TSB in their credit card division in Southend in Essex. I'd not been there long, but been promoted to a team leader. And as part of my assimilation into that role, I went on a training course on coaching and feedback, as it was a big focus for credit card services, it being a contact center. And on that training course, I had that moment of, wow, I didn't realize this was a job, and I'd love to do more of this. And the trainer at the time was Robin Fenner, is still a very good friend, and he kind of took me under his wing. And from there, I kind of developed the trainer skill set back in the late 1990s. It was still training and development, and the training course was still the primary medium in which learning and development was done. I remember at Lloyds TSB there was a big talk that there was this thing called e-learning, and should we go up to one of the computers and see what it looked like. So that was how early it was. But that was my first foray into learning and development. Very much built the skill set of a trainer before broadening into the other skills.
I think that's the magic number's about 20 years experience. That's about when I started as well. And I think the first job I got brought into was in the NHS as they called a technical trainer, because what they were doing is they were rolling out PCs for the first time. So we were actually having to train people to use, and this is going to age us, to use XP.
Right.
I'm like, wow, that's a blast from the past. And I don't think it was actually that long ago. They stopped using it, such as the funding for the NHS now and again.
Yeah.
One reflection I actually had as we're speaking about those 20 years is that I did a webinar recently for CIPD, and I started it off by saying that over those 20 years, I'd reflected that I think I'd been part of roughly 10 restructures, 5 of which I'd come off better. 5 of which I was part of the wielding axe. I was leaving the business on redundancy, and it actually made me think of, like, first of all, what is it that's happening in these organizations that this cyclical redundancy seems to keep happening and restructure. It's not always redundancy, but certainly restructure. And I guess, the personal reflection was, why do I even bother sticking part of it? Which I think, is the passionate side of it. But in terms of the actual L&D functions themselves, why do you think we seem to go in those cycles of restructure and redundancy? And indeed, do you find that is actually the case in your world as well, in your experience?
Well, first of all, to answer the first question, you don't look to reorganize an organization that's working effectively or efficiently. So something's not working, and you've got to say that certainly throughout the 20 odd years that I've been in the profession, there's been an anxiety that, are we delivering value? I mean, that's the Achilles heel. That's the thread throughout my whole tenure in the profession. But then, if we're looking for problems in which to deliver our solutions, and then looking back retrospectively at needs that weren't fully explored as, you know, and evidence to show that this is exactly what people need within the context of their role, then we're never going to demonstrate the value. So I remember back, I was at Disney in 2008, 2009, when the financial crash happened, the banking collapse. And somebody said to me, well, you know what happens, that, you know, we're usually the first departments that get cut. And this person was from marketing, and I was from learning and development. I was thinking, oh yeah, crikey. And then when you have a look to see what's happened now, that marketing has become less of an art. What was digital marketing has pretty much swarmed across marketing. It's data driven. You can estimate what you'll get from your digital marketing dollars in to the value out. It's become much more of a science than an art. And in learning and development, it's still an art. It's still an art based on a lot of assumptions, gut feeling, minimal observation, stakeholder weighting, all reasons not to get started on addressing, in inverted commas, a problem. But until we smarten up and we take, we've professionalized our what we do in learning and development, but I don't believe that we've professionalized to an extent where we, when I say professionalize, maybe I mean modernize, that we can speak with authority that the problems that we are addressing are the real problems, and that solutions that we're applying are solutions to those problems. I think that we create solutions and we look for problems to solve with them. Yeah, that's why, and you will always be reorganized. You will always be cut from teams because of the anxiety. Everyone's going to point a finger and say, well, you know, can we still get the same number of training days with one less person? Yeah, of course you can.
Very much. We're like the salesman I sometimes compare us to, and sort of, I like to say the olden days, but there's lots of L&D teams that are still doing it. There is that library or that LMS full of content, and then when a stakeholder comes and says, I need something, it's very much right, let's traveling salesman, let's unlock the trunk and see what's inside, and which one of these would you like to buy off me today? And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I've noticed on your LinkedIn feed you've put on there is that L&D is operated parallel to the organization and its people and not integrated with them. And I think that's key to what you're saying there, because when you talk about data as one example of that, I've seen data done well with L&D and done quite poorly. And the pattern I've seen is that the L&D gets trapped in its own world. Yeah. So the modern trend of looking at data with some teams has been to just look at L&D data, which realistically is what they were doing before anyway. They were doing happy sheets and how everyone likes what we're doing, how much are people accessing the courses, how many people are coming along to them, what's the scores they were doing, training needs analysis, learning needs analysis. That all outputs data, but I don't think that's the data that we should be going after. What is it you think about that data, and of course that being integrated more with the business?
Yeah, well, so my point around the operating parallel to the business is that we're generally invited into conversations because there is a performance or a results problem. Performance, to take away the jargon, it's what people do in their work, and the results is what they are expected to accomplish. So performance and results, doing and delivery, whatever the language. And then the first thing that we do when we go in there is we translate it into a learning need. So we distort it. So we take it from their world and we put it into ours, because that's the world we operate in. We categorize our solutions for the ease of delivery and for our catalogs. So we distort it, and usually those are standardized as well. So again, we distort it again. So what might turn into Mary's struggling to deliver on her projects as well as her business as usual is distorted into so she got a learning need, time management learning need. By the time she rocks up on the course, and we've all had it, Mary, why are you here? I don't know, my boss sent me. Yeah. Right. And then we get frustrated, and then we like, oh my God, why isn't your line manager engaged in this? It's because you've distorted her need. You operate a parallel, if not a satellite division to the rest of the organization. You distort the people's reality, what they're expected to do and what they're rewarded to do. And for the purposes of ease, for preference, we then deliver or make accessible educational content or experience that we think will more holistically address Mary's need. But one thing is missing from all of this: we don't know Mary's need. And even if we ask her for a learning need or a learning objective at the beginning of a training course, it's a cursory exercise to help people buy into what we are doing. And it means that, again, we don't have to step into their world. So there is so much around, and our absolving ourselves of responsibility. How many? I mean, I think that L&D need to wake up to the fragility of their solutions, and also not taking responsibility. If anybody tells me, oh well, the learning initiative didn't work because the line manager wasn't brought in, or nothing happens if you don't transfer this back to the workplace, this won't work, because humans aren't designed in order to absorb all of the stuff that you've just said. And also, as the learning professional, you've literally given me the hardest job of all. You've got the easy job. Like your thing is you digest all of this learning stuff, and you've got all your network, and you've got access to all of this content. You deliver it. That is easy. Yeah. What you've asked me to do is translate that stuff which I've been exposed to once to my job, for that to improve my performance and my results. This is where I think that a lot of L&D is a cop-out, and it runs parallel to the organization through preference and a lack of skill in what is actually required in organizations, which is around performance and results, not around the design and delivery of robust, in inverted commas, learning, which I will say is a verb and it's not a noun.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've said there. I mean, so many times, I mean, for me, leadership has been a massive thing that gets in the way, or actually gives rise to a great learning experience in an organization. And I mean that in two ways. I mean, operational leaders and also the L&D leaders themselves. So it's important that it's led that way. But performance, I use the term performance consultancy quite a lot rather than training consultancy or L&D consultancy, because I think you're spot on that there's other things at play here. There's what's the root problem that you're going after, or what's the opportunity or the challenge that you may not have seen yet. But also there's other factors that do this. So I often use the example of saying that, if we had customers out in the wide world, take Amazon, for example, and they were looking, and on the website, if it took them 3 hours to purchase one thing and they had to go through 3 or 4 or 5 different systems, and then they needed another system to help them use that website, we'd go, this is crazy. We can't expect customers to remain engaged and happy and all the way through this journey and remain a customer with us. Yet, that situation we've described is almost exactly the case in many organizations with their people, that their people, when they're talking to customers, have to skip between 2 or 3 or 4 different systems. They've got health systems on top of that. And then the induction training that you talked about is the case of, well, we're going to train you all those. Now you know them, off you pop. So, and then you do hear training. I think you're right. And it does come in the form of excuses now and again. Well, hang on a minute, it's not our fault, it's that there's too many systems, or the system isn't very easy to use, and the leaders aren't actually coaching people, and no one's embedding it with them. So L&D know this stuff, and you said it's a bit of a cop-out. Why is it you think that the L&D teams increasingly may be aware of those things, but they still don't do anything different about those?
Well, I've said before, I think that learning and development is a dance that everybody thinks they know. But it's not a waltz, it's not a tango, it's a conga line. The stakeholder will ask for training. Learning and development will say, yeah, of course, we'll do some training. So they jump on behind the stakeholder and start kicking their legs. Employees come along, go, oh yeah, I know what training is. I'll go along to that, and they join it, the conga line as well, and start kicking their legs. During it, everybody feels great. Then they stop doing it. There's the immediate elation. They go back to work, and nothing changes.
Yeah.
Because it's not sophisticated. It's not fit for purpose. It's just a lot of it is just there to make people feel good. It's a good conversation around something that people feel is important. Now, learning and development, don't say this because there's a lot invested in the way that things are done. Everybody takes great pride in their ability to design a great 1 day, 2 day, 3 day program. They think it's scientifically robust, that it's really interactive. It ticks all of the boxes, and they actually like delivering it and seeing people develop, as they say. I always say you never see people develop. You see people in a moment get a concept sometimes, or something relates to them. That's not sustained change. And learning and development, not in the business of measuring sustained change. The systems aren't designed to do so. So I think that there's a hell of a lot of preference. There's skill, there's identity attached to it as well, because everything that I've just described, learning and development, people consider that part of them and what they do. But I am heartened by a lot of learning and development professionals, certainly younger professionals who haven't been burdened by the legacy that was before. Well, I've had conversations with plenty of them saying, this stuff doesn't work, don't you? I'm getting really frustrated. Is this what learning and development really is? And I think that there is, whether these are people who are much more used to grabbing what they need in order to perform, whether it be Google, whether this be online expertise that they've gained elsewhere, whether this be connecting with experts. Maybe this is more around people's perception of work being tours of duty, where you go somewhere, you get what you want from it, you get the guidance and support and the experience that you need before you go on. Maybe they recognize that the dance that they're expected to do, which is the whole let's go on a training course and improve people's performance, isn't actually true. Unless work is manual or repeatable, then I will say, yes, you can practice, before you go onto the factory floor, or you go, and you do these things which don't have the variables that are going to change. But as far as knowledge work is concerned, I think it's a massive delusion, and also perpetuated by the market. If you can charge £2,500 a day, you'll keep things the same. And as we're seeing now in in COVID times, there are plenty of people struggling because the cash cow that was training supplied by vendors has been challenged. And I think that people have seen through that sticking that on computers doesn't work. It's which is so bizarre, because you stick expertise onto computers or deliver that as e-learning, and that's not having the impact that it was. Wait a minute, but I can keep going back to that again and again and again if I so wanted to. So wait a minute, I've got constant. This doesn't work, does it? I think we might have even burst the balloon of learning and development and realised that whilst we've been polishing our courses and spending so much time developing this brain-friendly learning or brain-friendly training, we've realized that we've been doing this in a vacuum. It's parallel to what people are trying to do. And there's got to be a different way. Well, I know that there's another way, and either we pick up the mantle and we run with that, or otherwise we leave ourselves open for disruption, because this is an opportunity that someone's going to grab with both hands, whether it's learning and development or not.
100%. I mean, I can remember down, I was at Learning Tech a fair few years ago now, and Charles Jennings was speaking there, obviously one of the kind of co-founders of the 70-20-10 movement. There's a phrase he said that always stuck with me, which was, if you ask a training consultant for training, guess what you get?
Yeah.
And you get training. And, many a tender conversation or conference later, I hear that a lot, is that companies will go, what we need is we want some leadership development for our leaders. What can you do? And there's 3 or 4 companies on the phone going, we can provide you with these leadership modules. And I'm the only one on the call going, oh, hang on a minute, what's really going on here? What is it your leaders are struggling with? Or what are the opportunities that they're missing? And I kind of go back to one of my experiences as a leader. In fact, just prior to becoming a leader for the first time, where I actually said, I want some leadership development. There's a program, can I go on it? I'd like to learn more about coaching. And I was greeted with you can't yet, because the course is only available when you are a leader. Like, wow, that's amazing. So not only is it probably going to be ineffective, I'm not going to figure it out until a year into being a leader, how ineffective that is, or what else I might need.
Well, you've just hit on one of the big problems with learning and development, is that we can design our training to be as robust and as engaging as entertaining or whatever people think is going to be sticky these days. But the biggest thing that we miss, the biggest opportunity that we that we don't take advantage of, is when it's actually required, when it is really required. Too much of learning and development is delivered or made available when it can, either when it's convenient or when the next course is running, and it's not good enough. Which means that people have already found their ways around the problem. There's always the question around learner engagement. First of all, I can't stand the term learner. I love that when Nick Shackleton-Jones says, people aren't called breathers. I think he's absolutely right. People don't identify as learners, and they're not known as learners anywhere else apart from this small satellite parallel part of the organization who tries to categorize their customer. When we were at Disney, there was we categorized personas and retailers. There was Asda Mama, all of this. You'd actually create personas based on what people actually did. And I love that we have so much access to people in our organizations, but instead of a category that they recognize themselves by, or anybody else does, we redo that. We recategorize them based on their interaction with our stuff. It's just so bananas. It's absolutely bonkers. What was the point? What was the what were we talking about before I went off on that tangent?
Leadership development. So I was talking about the course, and I couldn't go on it because I wasn't actually.
Yeah. So you've got people who are transitioning in organizations, which is the biggest opportunity that we face. And yet when they first join an organization, they're bombarded for a couple of hours or a day with all the information we think they should know, and then we're left to their own devices during the biggest opportunity that we have to influence their assimilation. We leave them to it. And then you've got, with new managers, that you've got a huge opportunity right there as they transition, and we leave them to it until there's a place come up on the flagship program. And I always say to people, don't even start down the generic training route. When I become a manager, I read the 1 Minute Manager. I read a lot of books, and the only thing that it didn't cover, one tiny little bit, was what to do as a manager in that organization, which in every organization I've ever worked in, the role is different. And that's because there's a cultural aspect which is stronger than any of the technical aspects as well. Now, there is some transferable stuff, but you tell me that in Lehman Brothers, I worked at Lehman Brothers, that being a purpose-driven, empathetic manager was what was required. That company didn't go bust because there was an excess of empathy or purpose. No. Like, that was cutthroat. That was one of the harshest environments I've ever worked in. Now, to be successful there, and anybody listening will go, "Whoa, they've gone bust, haven't they?" Yeah. But they were in existence for many, many years, and nobody was prepared to be a manager there by reading best practice books or attending a generic training course. You only learn to be successful, and you only learn to be successful in any organization. At Disney, for example, is highly political. There's a book called Disney Wars about how politics has been an integral part of Disney since its inception and continues to do so now. If you don't teach people how to operate within a political environment, as you are at Disney, you can't be successful. And so there was an organizational savvy program at Disney, just to turn a light on, just so that people knew what was going on. But then you learned from the School of Hard Knocks when you were in there. So the whole wait until there's a place on the formal development program misses that. That's the point I was making. Misses the biggest opportunities, which is timeliness. Give people what they need when they need it, and we have a huge opportunity to influence them. Because there's another thing. I don't think that learning and development is in the behavior change business. I think that it's an overinflated sense of load of codswallop. And I think that anybody who thinks that learning and development can change behavior is a fool. I honestly think that the best we can do is influence behavior, because the owner of the behavior is the only one who can change it. And in the same way as digital marketing has an opportunity to influence people, but don't miss the biggest opportunities to influence. And then think that later on down the line, when they don't care, when they turn up to your program and say, "Well, I don't know why I'm here," that your well-designed or delivered program is going to make one iota of difference. Or when I say iota, it could make an iota of difference. But if it's going to make the difference that it's designed to, you've got to capitalize on the opportunities that are available.
Yeah, well, it's got that hallmarks of parent and child all over it. That that we design a course. We say right now they know what the behaviours need to be. They know what the skills are. Bump. Why aren't you doing it? Well, it's the same way as me standing over my 8-year-old and saying, why aren't you still not making your bed? I've told you how to do it. You know how to do it. Why aren't you doing it? It needs more than that.
It does need more than that, and and I think that with adults as well, there's a bit more ring rust in there. If you tell people to do something, if they recognise the value in it, then they could go some way to do that. But we're much more complex than that. I think that we need systems in place to help to guide and support people to do more of the good stuff, more of the stuff that they're expected and rewarded to do. But again, I think that's looking more broadly at the potential of learning and development rather than the infrequent and few interactions via training programs, the even fewer by people self-selecting to do some e-learning or now getting people to log on to virtual sessions and thinking that this is going to be what's required. I mean, for goodness sake, Rob, there are skills gaps. There's urgency around real skills gaps right now, and learning and development have a pride of place here to address that. And how are we doing it? Oh, I'm just going to buy a new system. I'm going to fill it full of content, and it's tagged as well, so people can find. What are you doing? I mean, seriously,
we're going to put all our courses over Zoom rather than actually helping people how to actually work from home and use Zoom in the first place, so they can carry on doing their work, not to attend courses. How can I help you to continue doing your job? I think your comparison to marketing, I think it's actually got me thinking while you've been talking there, just about when you talk about in the flow of work a lot, which we've been dabbling with there quite closely. I just think you think about how much money is paid by companies to advertise at certain parts on the TV schedule, or on your walk to the station, that suddenly you get the McDonald's advert or whatever it is, other burgers are available as you walk in there. And it's that moment in time as you need something, you go, oh God, yeah, I am a bit thirsty actually. I'm just gonna. What could we learn more from that?
Well, you just think that over Christmas, I as a present for somebody who's into nature and stuff, I got a how to save bees kit, right? And it was I just found it somewhere. I thought, that looks nice. But ever since then, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Google, I keep on getting these things about bees. And what I'm thinking, right? So Google knows it's following me around, and I'm learning a little bit more about bees here. But I started that. Right. So what I've done is I've looked into saving bees, and now I'm getting more and more information and education around how to save bees, as well as being pointed in the direction of products and services, which is clearly what digital marketing is all about. But when I'm talking about learning in the flow of work, it is recognizing and anticipating the needs of people. And this is much easier than it sounds, because again, focusing on the biggest opportunities you have, your HR system can tell your learning system when people join your organization, when they change roles, when they move, when they're expected to do something cyclical within the employee life cycle, when line managers are expected to do things, whether that be performance reviews, talent process, financial budgeting responsibilities. All of that stuff is all in your systems now. So because most of those are unfamiliar, because they are done infrequently, or they are brand new, or they're facing challenges that people already face, you can surface this stuff. It's all available to you. And then what you do with smarter technology, you can learn from the behavior of other people, not because they are interested in learning content, but because they are trying to do something and they're picking up resources. And again, that can feed into other people of comparable roles and levels within your organization. All of a sudden, you are guiding and supporting people based on what you know in your organization and what your smart technology is finding out what people are expected to do. And then, people always, come back with, oh, learning in the flow of work. It's, it's just a fad. It's just this, it's just that. It's the equivalent of having somebody tap you on the shoulder when you need it, say, hey, did you know you've got to do this? Oh, and if you didn't know you had to do that, did you know how to do it as well? Here are what people in this organization already do in order to get that thing done. It's all about performance and results. It's about taking the chance away. It's not relying on people to remember a load of information and be able to regurgitate that when they think it's required. It's rich in context and it's close to the point of need. It's kind of a no-brainer. And of course, it's not absolutely everything, but when you are eliminating some of the certainly some of the predictable and some of the blockers to efficient performance, as well as successful performance, you're really opening the way for people to stand on the shoulders of their colleagues and get more stuff done. Then there is other stuff there. I mentioned before about real skills gaps. There is a deficit of digital basics in our organizations and in learning and development. There are still opportunities for people to dive deeper into a particular discipline and then seek ways to apply that to their work and their professional development. So it's not the be all and end all, but my word, it would eliminate all the rubbish inductions that everybody's expected to do on day one, week one. It would stop people being neglected when they transition into higher positions, and not just in management, but in leadership as well, and help people transition into new teams where there are different rules of engagement, where there are different expectations as far as not just communication, but the means of influence as well. All of that stuff can be predictably and reliably anticipated and surfaced to guide and support people during those really, really difficult times. Yeah. And then, we've got a plethora of other skills and mechanisms in learning and development to help with stuff on top of that.
So something you said there as well, that you said something about some things that get in the way and blockers to stuff, and tying in with the experiential side of things. I know that you've had Danny Seals on one of your episodes of the Learning and Development podcast as well.
Yeah.
And I know I worked with him briefly at Talk for a year or two. And I remember he was saying one of his passionate things was around when people first join the organization. So it's not even moving around the organization. It's when you first join, what do you actually want to know on day one? You want to know where to park. You want to know where you're going to go in. You need to know where the loo is. When am I going to get paid? What do I need to bring with me? What am I going to wear? Is there a dress code? Where do I eat? All these things. But quite often you get thrown into a training room, day one of training, here we go. And the reason that's made me think of it is then that, as an induction trainer of quite a few years in my sort of earlier career, that sort of stuff then does block the learning. The learning of what you're trying to get across, simply because what's really important to them at that moment is when they're going to get paid. What time do we do this? I need to make sure I can pick the kids up from school, whatever it might be. So what are those other things that L&D really need to start getting more involved in, that you think, when you talk about performance and things that block performance, what are those?
So, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. Where I'd say induction and new manager are big opportunities. We've seen with COVID, and I think that it's been actually really heartening to see that learning and development are responding to what's actually going on. And there are pressing needs there, whether that be with employee well-being, because people are struggling. The expectations have changed. Many of us are homeschooling, so we've got competing responsibilities. There's also the problem of remote management as well, that there's quite a lot had been a lot of management had relied on seeing people. That's why presenteeism had been such a problem, because how do you manage people if you can't see them? There's remote working as well. That not just about setup of workstations, but what does it mean to be in meetings? How do you prioritize when people can see that you're on and just steal a few moments? I mean, I don't know about you, but I can spend days of Zoom, whilst my bladder expands and my dog tells me that it needs to go for a walk. There's all sorts of planning and prioritizing that needs to happen as a result. So any kind of transition or adaptation, as I've mentioned, is a huge opportunity for learning and development. And when it comes to any of those, I think it really requires a reframe from us as well. For too long, learning and development initiatives have been based on the premise of we need you to know this. That's why inductions can be 1, 2, 3, 4 hours long, and it is here's the mission, vision, strategy, the structure. Now here's how to log into the intranet. Here's how to do your expenses. It's none of it's based on any science whatsoever. Anybody worth their salt in learning and development knows that that cannot be remembered. It doesn't matter if that person's writing stuff down, but what you remember is that person was just introduced to the to somebody sitting next to them 5 minutes ago, and they can't remember their name now, and now you're on the intranet. Like, so, you know, like it cannot stick. So we need to reframe from we need you to know this to this is going to help you with what you're trying to do now, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, not just spacing stuff out. Again, like spacing can help when you're learning, like when you're learning a language, when you are learning to play the guitar. Again, it's repeatable and it's a lot of it's manual. But what about knowledge work? You know, so this is how you have a tricky conversation. All right, so that works then. And here's another tricky conversation, except this person doesn't like you and he's known as being a little bit shifty. So what you think this conversation is going to be probably isn't what it is. You go, oh, but my last tricky conversation went well. Like, you know, it's too dynamic. So so we need to help people when they need the help, but based on what they determine the need is, which is likely to be in the context of the work that they are expected to do in the way that the organization expects and rewards as well. So it does require a real flip. And this is where I think that that it's contrary to a lot of instructional design as well, which is based on we need you to know this. But you know, you're not going to get meaningful performance change with not seeking to truly understand the performance context.
I think knowledge is a key area of all this for me, because it is often knowledge dumps. We need you to know this. Here's a bunch of content. Write it down. You'll find it on the answers system or whatever it might be. I actually remember working with it was a commercial partner of one of the other organisations I was working at, and what they did was, after an induction, they actually gave an assessment to each individual. And that assessment was a role play around a typical basic kind of call type that was coming through. And I just observed them for one day, and I went through there, and they'd actually were going to fail somebody based on the fact that they couldn't remember the identification and verification process. Now, I chatted to the person who was marking it afterwards, and it was actually operationally marked rather than L&D marked. And I said, okay, if that person couldn't remember it, what would you expect them to do? And they said, well, it's on the system. They just go on there and it guides them through it. Okay, yeah. So if that person had done that then, what would you have done? I said, well, we failed them because they should know it. Well, why does the system exist? Because they can't possibly remember everything. So why did you fail them for not remembering something? And it's like, it just seemed that everyone has fallen into this trap of you must know, you must know, you must know. And you kind of made me think, this is going back a little bit. My son Ryan, he's 10 years old. And there was a point, I think it was whether it's preschool going into year 1 or something, it was like big pressure test. You had to know how to tie your shoelaces before you went into that year. And he was like, how do we do that? How do we do that? And I slipped into like good old traditional training mode of do this, do that, do the other. Why aren't you doing it? And I went, hang on a minute. What you do when you're on your Nintendo Wii or whatever it was at the time is you go onto YouTube and you find someone who's playing that game and you figure out through them guiding you how to do it. And if you forget a bit, you go back and look again. So I said, why don't you just go on YouTube and search for tying shoelaces? And just have an experiment. And he went away. He came back. He said, that one didn't work. I said, well, have a look at another one like you would. Oh, yeah, I know. He did that. And he came back. And half an hour later, he went, I can do it now. Amazing, isn't it? Whereas, traditionally we'd go, right, okay, why hasn't this person got it? I've trained them how to do it and they don't know how to do it. I made it fun. I designed a brand new course over it in an e-learn and they still don't know how to do it. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. And I think, actually one of the courses when I was at Sky, now don't get me wrong, it wasn't the perfect picture because we were still learning at the time. But I actually said that on day 1, new members of that team shouldn't go in a training room. Spend it with the bosses, the colleagues, in the environment where they're going to be working, because they'll learn a lot more on that first day. And they'll also know then, when you talk about in the flow of work, they'll know what they need to learn. rather than just being told. I guess,
Yeah,
it's dead easy in our positions as well to kind of go, we sound like we've got all the answers. We know what's going wrong, what needs to be done. I know I've fallen into these exact same traps and still do now and again. I've been the trainer that's marched out with a flip chart and said, you have covered this. We did it on week 2, day 3, that sort of stuff. What would you look back and go, oh my God, why did I do it that way? And that was probably an influence for you to thinking differently.
Oh dear. Cool.
Too many to delve through.
Too many. Look, Rob, I described my entrance into learning and development, and it being, from a training route. I honestly think for the first 5 or 6 years, the answer to every question was a training course. Yeah. So every one of those was wrong. That was, do you know what? I would say, except I was involved in, and the best induction I ever experienced when I joined Lloyd's TSB, and I was one of the phone operators. We spent 3 weeks preparing for the phone, like the whole thing. You'd learn the system, and do you know what? I think that within that first week, we actually did go to the live work environment, and we listened to a few calls to create that urgency, as well as to create the hooks, as I like to say, that you recognize are your concerns, so you can kind of hang the learning experience off of. But I got involved in the and it wasn't just the delivery, it's the facilitation of that 3-week induction event, which really did prepare people to do the job, which of course, these tricky conversations we were in, I didn't mention, it was actually in credit card collections. So these were overdue payments. Really, really hard job to do as yeah, I know. It was tricky, but everything that you everything within that 3-week experience was preparing you for the phone. So I'd say that was a particularly good one. But then I remember being asked to help the customer service team at an area of NatWest when I worked there in credit card collections, and I just looked up what I think it was for books. I might have even downloaded it from the internet, but it certainly wasn't as open it was now, to see what topics to cover in customer service training. And then I tried to apply those topics to the telephone here. And I spent a couple of hours with the phones team trying to listen in on what they did. But really, I used that time to confirm that the content that I was about to put into the course was right. And you know what? Everyone had a great time on the course. There were such strong characters. Everybody was willing to get involved. We did some exercises. We had a laugh. They went back and nothing changed. I remember
great day out. A great day out.
Great day out. And everybody, I got 10s all through on the happy sheets. And I remember delivering some performance management training at the same place. And I did exactly the same thing. Found out what other people were delivering. I cobbled this together, did it. It got great reviews. And then I then delivered it at Lehman Brothers, and I got ripped to shreds. It was some of the most uncomfortable hours I've ever spent in front of people. And towards the end, it might have been towards the lunch, or somebody at the back went, "When do we tell them they're crap?" Like that, we go, brilliant. Oh my God. I was dying up there thinking that this same content that I thought had worked so well at NatWest was going to work comparably well here. I mean, I look back, and the vast majority of training I delivered was useless, actually affecting the performance and the results of what I was asked to actually do. It was great at providing experiences that people liked, but I don't think it made a jot of difference.
And then, of course, we end up measuring each other on how much it was liked, and was it a
how
great
much
day?
It was liked. Yeah, and also training hours. Another thing that we spend. So as I was highly successful as a result of that. But you know what? When it comes down to it as well, Rob, and I think this is the real acid test, is certainly in my later days at Disney, when I was involved in conversations with the European board when it really mattered. When I was asked to get involved in the integration of different business areas into one, I was asked for a training course, and I said no. I knew a training course wouldn't work because they had to integrate these areas, and this product knowledge had to be accessible. So we created mini accelerated apprenticeships. when I was asked to help Italy in their development of digital capability from pretty much a standing start, I was asked for a training course, and I said no. Like, a training course isn't going to work. So when it really come down to it, certainly in my later career of in-house, when I had to deliver results, I wouldn't use a training course. And I was going to say, I was going to say with a straight face, I wouldn't use e-learning, but we all know I wouldn't use e-learning.
Really?
So when it really matters, we don't use the core skill set of L&D. I wonder what that says. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, actually. I've said it a few times that one of my favorite questions when I was an L&D business partner in that role was to go, okay, I see what you're asking for. If there wasn't an L&D team, what would you be doing to try and to get to this result or solve this problem or whatever it might be? And, pursue that line. And there used to be some fantastic insight and answers that would come from it. And then I could focus more on how can we help you do that?
Yeah.
So whether it be, well, we'll get some coaching in, we'll spend some time with the people, we'll get some focus groups, we'll redesign the system so it's simpler and easier. So then, wow, this stuff needs happening now, because it doesn't sound like train's going to help you at all.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
If ROI has always been a big one for me. Return on investment of training programs and L&D. And I think you've just mentioned before, we've kind of alluded to the fact that it's been inward looking quite a lot. We create our own KPIs and we measure against them, and hey, we win, and then there's a restructure. So we mustn't have been that good in the first place. If you were to go, what should the L&D value? What should the measures of that be?
So first of all, I'd say that the problem we struggle with ROI is because we've got a bag of solutions that we're looking to apply problems to. And then people encounter our solutions, and because we didn't know what their problems were and we hadn't quantified those, we then look at and wonder, did it work?
Yeah.
That is hilarious. It's the equivalent of walking around your house with a hammer, just banging everything, and then wondering, I wonder if that did any good whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like you might have hit a nail, you might have actually hit a screw and it might have gone in, but largely you've left a load of holes.
Well, it's the old adage, isn't it, that a stopped clock is right at least twice a day.
Yeah, exactly. So I always say, if you are trying to retrospectively look back to see whether what you'd invested in terms of your curriculum or the training that you provided without a quantifiable measure beforehand of what it is that you're trying to affect, you can't. It's a fool's errand. And what you're looking for is a magic formula from a fairy tale. It doesn't exist. So what you need to do is, if you really care about understanding the impact of what you do, you need to know the problem that you're trying to solve first. It goes back right to the very beginning. But that's why you need a performance conversation. You need to understand the meaningful metric for the people you're seeking to influence. Now, that might be a service level agreement. It might be for induction. It might be retention. It might be readiness to perform. For line managers, it might be their ability to deliver to the level of the number of people they have in their team, because a lot of new managers can be guilty of trying to do all the work themselves and not truly delegating. But you've got to ask yourself, what would be an indicator of that actually happening? So you need to understand what the business measure or the organizational measure is before you actually get involved. And then once you understand that, then you can run in small experiments to see whether you can move the needle with the people who are accountable for those results. That, for me, is the only way. Anything else, you're trying to justify the spending on a solution you've already determined is what you want, and that you're going to try to hawk around as the answer to further undefined problems.
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there when you use the word accountable. Because, for me, the measures that need to be measured are those things, those business metrics, the CSATs, the MPSs of this world, the profit, the loss, whatever it might be. And L&D aren't accountable for those. They're not accountable for them. And there's many different ingredients that go into creating them, that impacts them, that makes them better and worse. We're just one. So how do you measure that? It's very difficult to, like you say. I think the analogy I use is that just because the omelette didn't turn out right doesn't mean the egg was off.
Yeah, no, that's right.
There's loads of other things that can go into that.
It comes down to data and evidence-based practice. That's all it is. We've been talking about it for a long time in HR and L&D. You start with an assumption that something is wrong. You seek data to either challenge or validate that. So that's your very first point. At that point, a lot of learning and development professionals say, "You all build that course." Right, but you don't. You say, "Okay, I'm just going to try to find some data, or can you provide me with some data that shows me that that is a problem?" So there's your data. Your evidence then is working with the people that are accountable for the performance and results. What is their experience? What is stopping them from efficiently and effectively getting the numbers or the data that they are accountable for? Then working with them to try to address some of that friction. Some of that might be capability. Some of it might just be access to information. Some of it might be process. Very small amount of that is likely to be about capability and skill. But unless you actually dig below the surface and understand from a performance consulting perspective, then you're really not going to know. So I wouldn't be hawking out a communication skills course for a problem that you've not fully explored, because every organization that I've worked with who have made the pivot from a learning focus to performance focus spend more and more time on the discovery phase to find out what the real problem is than those who aren't performance focused. Because if you're learning focused, do you know what, Rob? Anything will do, to be honest.
And if you get the real problem, you'll probably find out that a hell of a lot of symptoms disappear. Anyway, David, that's been a fantastic conversation. I think there's one thing left for us to do based on what we've been talking about there. Stick a pin somewhere and see which bit it was. Is obviously the podcast is Leadership Untitled. We need to come up with a title for this episode. What sort of ideas have you got based on what we've been talking about there? What do you think?
I think we've spent a great deal of time talking about what we've learned. So I wonder if there was some kind of way of shortcutting experience and helping people coming through, or help. Maybe we've put on a couple of light bulbs for people who are listening that maybe have made a few of the mistakes. So something about lessons learned or learn from our mistakes.
Learn from our mistakes. I think I quite like that one. Because I've made plenty of them, I'll tell you that. All the things that I now consider that I do well, I've learned predominantly from how they've been done badly, whether it's myself, others, or a combination of them. So I like that. Learn from our mistakes. Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you very much today, David, for coming along and sharing all your experience and your thoughts around L&D and all the things that are going well and not so well in the industry at the minute and how to improve it. I've found it a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Speak to you soon. So that brings us to the end of the Leadership Untitled podcast for today. This episode will be called Learning from Our Mistakes, on the back of David and I sharing the fact that we too fell in the same traps quite often and still do, that we talk about so often in our own communications. Thank you again for David for sharing all his insight, wisdom and experience with us. And also thank you for listening. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks a lot. Bye now.